Homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen. Today we are making spicy pickled beets. And I don't know about you, maybe you grew up loving beets. I did not. Beets are definitely a challenge for me flavor-wise. They're very earthy, and I have spent 20 years figuring out different ways to like beets because they are so nutritious and they're fun to grow and they're pretty easy to grow. And so I really wanted to like them. And so I just kept trying different things over and over again. And a lot of times repetition helps. But the first way that I found that I really liked beets was spicy pickled beets. And this recipe originally was on one of the boxes that the ball canning rings and lids come in. It was just on the side of a box, and for whatever reason I decided to try it. You can do regular pickled beets, which is basically just vinegar and maybe some sugar and salt. Spicy pickled beets have other things in them. So there's onions, there are some nice sweet kind of baking spices, so cloves, allspice, cinnamon, and mustard seed, I believe. And so it's a little bit more tangy and a little bit more interesting than just a regular pickled beet. And I love these. They're like candy. I love them on salads. My husband won't eat them, and so they're all mine when I get to make them. And they just get used all winter. I'm using a mix of beets in this recipe. This is kind of your standard red beet. I think this is bull's blood. I'm not sure. I'll put the name on the screen. I have a mix of different beets. And then this one is a Chioggia. This is the one where if you cross it across the middle, it has concentric rings like a target. Delicious beet, very easy to grow for me here. For whatever reason, these always do super well for me. You can pickle yellow beets. You can pickle any kind of beets you like. It doesn't have to be the traditional red beets. And yeah, it's a great way to put beets in your pantry and eat them all winter long. Let's get started.
So I'm just putting my 2 pounds of beets into a good-sized pot and covering with water. And you notice how I have those stems trimmed to about 1 inch. That helps a lot with bleeding. So don't trim them really close. Leave a little bit of stem on there. And I'm just going to bring that to a simmer and simmer until they're tender. That can take anywhere from a half an hour to an hour, depending on how big your beets are. Those actually just got turned off and sat overnight because I was doing that at the end of the day. Drain off your water. If you've ever thought to use that as a dye, it doesn't stick well. It turns brown. I know it's really tempting to think, oh, I'm going to put something in that and make a cool red color. And then peeling these, you want to cut off both ends, and then that skin should just slip right off very easily. It's really kind of gratifying to do this. And how long you cook these is going to depend on how big the beet is. And basically, I try to err on the side of just done enough that that skin is going to easily slip, but not absolutely mushy, because they're going to cook for another half an hour in the canner. And so I don't want them to be super, super soft at this stage, just cooked through. And you get a feel for it after a while. But as long as those skins are easily slipping off, you're good. I love how clean these come out. And then I'm cutting my beets into about 1 inch chunks. There's that Chioggia that I mentioned. You can see that concentric rings in there. And so depending on the beet, I'm cutting them both directions or all 3 directions, just so that I have basically bite-sized pieces. And the size here is important just because the timing on the cooking is based on how big the beets are. And so you want them to be about the same size. 2.5 cups of apple cider vinegar. You could use white vinegar here if you liked. I like the fruitiness of the apple cider. 2 cups of sugar. Anybody else use their lid as a measuring scraper? 3 cups of sliced onion. 3 cinnamon sticks. A tablespoon of mustard seed. And a teaspoon each of whole allspice and whole cloves, a teaspoon of salt, 1.5 cups of water, And then you're just going to bring that to a simmer. And once it's up to a boil, you want to simmer that for about 5 minutes. Make sure that you stir it well at the beginning because all of that sugar will burn sitting on the bottom of the pot if it's not dissolved. Basically, you're infusing the flavor of those herbs into that liquid. Once that's been cooking for a couple of minutes, you're going to add in your beets in order to heat them through. What we're going to do here is called a hot pack. And hot pack is when everything is hot when it goes into the jars. The advantage of hot pack, if it gives you the option to do one or the other in a recipe, is that vegetables actually have a surprising amount of air in them. And when they boil a little bit, a lot of that air is forced out. And so you're going to have less that it's going to siphon and lose some liquid during canning. You can dig around and find those cinnamon sticks, remove those. And then we're just going to fill up our jars to a 1/2 inch headspace. And because I didn't know if I was going to get 3 jars or 4 jars out of this batch, I like to fill everything pretty evenly and then go back and fill again, because I hate it when you get everything completely full to the top and then you've got one that's like 3/4, and so you need to rearrange everything. Although I usually end up rearranging everything anyway. And then it turns out I did need another jar, which kind of surprised me. Normally I just get 3 jars instead of 4 out of this. I'm not sure why I got 4 this time. Canning recipes are random that way. Always have extra jars ready. And then you want to, once you get everything in your jars, you want to kind of even everything out. Make sure that your beets are underneath the liquid. And then do the final liquid up to that first thread on the top of the jar is a 1/4 inch. And I usually abandon the funnel somewhere in this process because it becomes more cumbersome than it's worth. Always remember to wipe your rings. The number one reason that seals fail is because there's a little bit of food on the edge of the ring. Sometimes there's also a crack or a chip, and you will feel it when you're cleaning these. Ideally, you felt it and removed that jar before you filled them up, but you don't want to can in a jar that's got a chip on it. And then finger tight on your rings into the canner. And your canning liquid should be at least 1 inch above the jars. I ended up having to add a little bit of liquid to this. Bring that back to a full boil before you start your timer, and then can for 30 minutes. And then usually you turn the canner off and let them sit in the hot water with the lid off for 5 minutes, just to bring the temperature down a little bit before you remove the jars. It helps the seal set a little bit longer. You don't have to do that, but it does give you oftentimes a better seal. All right, you guys, these are cooled and fully ready. I like to pick up my jars without a ring with my fingers and make sure that the lid is well sealed. And here is our beautiful spicy pickled beets. I love these on salads, absolutely fantastic. And then with the extra brine that I had left over, I just chopped up an onion and poured it over an onion and put it in the fridge as a fridge pickle. And these will be fantastic on tacos and things like that. You can basically never have too many pickled onions in your fridge, so I made use of the leftover brine with that. So there you have it. Spicy pickled beets, my favorite way to eat beets. Give this recipe a try. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.